indicated before that any organization succeeds based on the degree to which the individual in the organization goes the extra mile in pursuit of the organization's objectives. In a sense, there's two kinds of people who come walk into a business or into an organization. People are there to get as much as they can for giving as little as possible, or people who are there to really make a discretionary contribution. They're there because they want to be there. They want to give something. It is the degree to which you have the second kind of person is the degree to which the organization succeeds. And what's very important about the second kind of person is that people don't work for organizations because they want to. People work for people. In other words, if you want to understand the conditions under which people are going to work because they really want to rather than because they have to, you need to ask yourself who's the boss they're working for. People work for a boss because they want to. Now, we've asked people over the years to describe the kind of boss that they would work for because they wanted to. And what you have here is a reasonably typical list that one would get from a group of people. And the first thing that strikes one about the list is just how long it is. And initially that's quite intimidating because you think, well, who can do this? I mean, this is, they're describing a saint here. But what's interesting about the list is that there are synonyms in the list. And if there are synonyms in the list, you can reduce the list. And in fact, we've managed to reduce the list to two core themes. First of all, there's a soft and a kind theme that has to do with, the boss has empathy, the boss is interested in me, the boss is approachable, the boss listens, and so on. And the best word to hold that kind theme is the word care. Because what you're really saying about this boss is that this person has a genuine interest in you. They're not just there to get something out of you. But then there's a harder theme. If you work for a boss, for example, who's always honest, that boss won't always be nice with you. Sometimes they say things to you that you find upsetting. And the reason why you want to get that feedback is that you want to know where you stand so that you can learn and you can grow. So the harder theme has got to do with growth. Now, in other words, what I'm suggesting is that when people work for a boss because they want to, it is because the boss really only does two things for them, cares for them sincerely and gives them an opportunity to grow. Now, what I found over the years is that these criteria are astonishingly consistently held. I mean, I first discovered this on gold mines in South Africa in the 80s. So if you ask a person who shovels rock for a living, has not had a day's worth of formal education in their lives, to describe the boss who they'd work for because they really wanted to, they'd say the boss who cares for me and grows me. I've subsequently asked that question of people throughout the world. I mean, the academics in Japan, who's the boss you'll work for because you really wanted to, and they'd say the boss who cares for me and grows me. We need to account for why these criteria are so consistently held. And in order to do that, we need to ask ourselves, what are we asking when we ask this question? Who's the boss you're going to work for because you want to? Let's assume you work for somebody because you want to. And that person comes to you one day and they ask you to do something. You'll probably do it. I mean, particularly if the person has done all of this stuff for you. They're interested in you, supportive, they care for you and they grow you. Which suggests that you, in a sense, give that person the right to ask you to do things or to exercise power over you. Which means that these criteria of care and growth are the universal criteria for legitimate power. And if you see it from that point of view, the universality makes absolute sense. The first relationship of power you had with another person in your life is with your parents. And insofar as it's a first relationship, it's a principal relationship. And what I mean by this is that if you want to understand the principle of a matter, examine the first manifestation of the matter. Now, insofar as the first manifestation of power is parenting, there are basically two people in the relationship. There's a big one and there's a little one. And the job of the big one for the little one is very specific. It is care and growth. In other words, it suggests that the job of the big one for the little one in any relationship of power is care and growth. If the subordinate in the relationship experiences that the big one, the one who has the power, is there to care for me and grow me, the subordinate becomes willing. When the subordinate experiences the big one is there for any other reason, then the subordinate becomes resistant. Now, this is very significant when one examines what happens in hierarchies, for example. Fundamentally, in most organizations, you can reduce the hierarchy to basically 4 personality types. Sitting right on the top of the corporate cake is a person that you could call Lord Creosote, who is very significant. They answer to the principle of the organization, like the shareholder, and normally it's about producing a result. However, they don't produce the result themselves. There's somebody else who does it for them, somebody that you could call the boss. This person is very rarely older than 45. They've got at least 3 business school qualifications in their back pocket. They go to a gymnasium 3 times a week. The other 4 days of the week they ride a bicycle. These are executive class in our organizations. The people who have the knowledge and the skill in order to kind of come up with a strategic plan. However, clearly they don't they don't produce the result themselves. That they get from somebody who reports to them, who's a supervisory kind of person, a person you could call the overseer. And the overseer's job, by the way, is very different from the boss's job. Where the boss's job is to come up with a strategy and a plan, the overseer's job is in a sense to get somebody else to do the job, the worker. And then you get a job that gets done and a result that gets produced. Now, the problem in all hierarchies, in all organizations that I've worked with so far, becomes apparent when you ask the equivalent of Lord Creosote what their job is. If I went to Lord Creosote and said, excuse me, what is your job? What do you actually account for to your principals? He's going to say, my job is to produce a result. Now, that approach is fundamentally problematic. Because if you ask Lord Creosote, so how on earth do you do this? He says, well, it's very easy. I go to the market and I buy myself some labor, a certain sort of units schooled like you'd school a boss, more schooled like you'd school an overseer, some more schooled like you'd school a worker. I'll bring that back to the workplace. I'll add some more resources to this and I shake it all up and it produces a result. In other words, there's both almost like an alchemical sort of a view of how organizations produce results, or if you like, an engineering view. An organization is an organogram, a machine that you oil in the right places, put the right resources in, and then it produces a result or an outcome. Now, while this description of how the enterprise works kind of works in the head, the problem with this description is that it challenges what actually happens, because the person who's actually doing the job that produces the result is the worker. And what you are saying to this person, without even being remotely embarrassed, is you saying to this person, listen, you are the human resource that I'm going to use to make money for the shareholder. Now, consider this for a moment. When you use resources, what do you do to them? Basically you consume them. In other words, what you're saying to the workers, come here, let me use you. It's almost like cannibalism of a kind. So don't be surprised that most working people are fundamentally disgruntled about working. They feel used. They feel that they're being depleted and exhausted. So Lord Creosote thinks that it's his job to produce the result. So, well, who do you get the result from? Well, obviously he's going to get the result from the boss. Which creates the condition where the boss is there to serve Lord Creosote. She's going to get the result that she's giving to him from the overseer. So the overseer is there to serve the boss, and the overseer is going to get his result from the worker who's there to serve the overseer. In other words, the direction of service is up the line. Now, don't be surprised, therefore, that the worker is disgruntled, and the very last thing you get from those workers is commitment. You don't get much work from him, because he feels used. Now, what we're suggesting here is that it is possible to get the worker to actually work because they really want to make a discretionary contribution, and that discretionary contribution will give you stellar results. But you can only do that when the power that is exercised over the worker is legitimate. It does the thing that power is supposed to do, which is care and growth. And the person who exercises power over the worker is the overseer, which suggests that the overseer's job isn't to produce a result. The overseer's job is to care for and grow the worker. That doesn't suggest that the overseer has no interest in the result. He needs to keep an eye on the result like a coach needs to keep an eye on the scoreboard. But his job is not to produce the result. His job is to care for and grow the worker. And that suggests, therefore, that the overseer will only do that with any sense of commitment, because he wants to rather than has to. When the power that is exercised over him is legitimate, it does the thing that power is supposed to do. And the person who exercises power over him is his boss. What we're suggesting, therefore, is that there's a similar shift required of the boss. She needs to give some attention to the scoreboard, but fundamentally her job is to care for and grow the overseer, and likewise, Lord Creosote gives some attention to the scoreboard, but his job is actually to care for and grow the boss. Now, this is, if you like, the basic requirements of the implications of care and growth for an organization. But clearly, many organizations become a lot more complex than this. I mean, if you think about what this means, for instance, with an organization with a very steep hierarchy, like a deep level narrow reef mine in South Africa, then basically, we need to be a little bit more politically sensitive in this country. So we really need to have a Lady Creosote. But the boss is, in a sense, replaced by three levels in the hierarchy. There's a person called the general manager, there's a person called a manager, and a person called a mine overseer. The overseer is replaced by two kinds of people. A person that you could call a shift boss. Actually, the more politically correct term for this person is actually shift overseer. Shift boss is a bit antiquated. And then a person called a miner. A miner is a person who holds a blasting certificate and actually is accountable for the safety of what goes on in workplaces. It's a supervisory role. And then finally, you get the person who does the job, a rock drill operator. We call him an RDO. And then you get a result from the RDO doing his work. Now, just like in a 4-level hierarchy that we described before, you have exactly the same problem in very tall hierarchies. I mean, so if you ask Lady Creosote, what is your deliverable? That she'd say, my job is to produce a result. So, well, where do you get that result from? It's from the general manager, and he gets it from the manager, who gets it from the mine overseer, who gets it from the shift boss, who gets it from the miner, who gets it from the rock drill operator. Now, clearly that pulls everybody's attention away up the line, service up the line, and that suggests then that the tasks that get done in order to get a good result are actually not done particularly well at all. There's no sense of commitment because the RDO feels that he's being used, and the last thing you get from somebody who's feeling used is a sense of commitment to their job. And so we have to recognize that it's possible that in this instance also the RDO can come to work to make a deliberate and discretionary contribution and produce a stellar result. But that will only happen when the power that is exercised over him is legitimate. It does the thing that power is supposed to do, which is care and growth. And the person who exercises power over the RDO is his miner. The miner's job, therefore, is to keep an eye on the scoreboard, but actually to care for and grow the RDOs and the teams working for them, which suggests that the same has to be true all the way up the line. The shift boss has to keep an eye on the scoreboard and care for and grow the miner. The mine overseer keeps an eye on the scoreboard and cares for and grows the shift boss. The manager keeps an eye on the scoreboard and cares for and grows the mine overseer. The general manager keeps an eye on the scoreboard and cares for and grows the manager. And finally, Lady Creosote keeps an eye on the scoreboard, but actually her job is to care for and grow the general managers. Now, if one looks at this approach from this point of view, one of the things it seems to suggest is that if you want an organization to change, then basically you need to shift everybody from being here to get a result to being here to give something to their subordinates, to care for and grow their subordinates. So if you say, well, who's the person that has to change first? It would appear like it would have to be Lady Creosote. However, I'd suggest that actually this is not just Lady Creosote's job. It's equally at issue all the way up the line. I mean, if we examine, for instance, the mine overseer, from the mine overseer's point of view, in any situation, he can either construct his intent on what he's trying to get from that situation, or he can construct his intent on what he's giving to that situation. And what we've been arguing so far is that basically any results are concerned with what the mine overseer gets. What the mine overseer should be giving is the care and growth of his immediate subordinates, which would be the shift bosses in his section. Now, we say, well, is it possible for the mine overseer to do this without permission? Does he require to work in an organization where this is coming from the top? And actually, I don't think this is the case. Because if you consider where these criteria of care and growth came from, you remember we had this list. And if we examine the list and we say, is there anything on the list that the mine overseer could not personally do for any person reporting to him? You know, can he be interested? Can he be supportive? Can he act as a mentor? Can he be obviously he can. And this is actually true for any person in the hierarchy. So actually, it doesn't matter who you are, you have a personal responsibility to care for and grow the people who are working for you if you have a leadership role. You know, fundamentally, people only work for people who care for them and grow them. And insofar as you've got people reporting to you and you know what these criteria are, you're accountable for cultivating a group of people who are willing, even if you're halfway down the hierarchy or indeed a supervisor right at the bottom.